there.
Sorry, I forgot to record because
Yes,
Ruth and Carol are not here today and they wanted the recording. Sorry.
Right. Ruth is actually with her sister because her brother-in-law is in the hospital. So that's one of the reasons why she's up there. So, okay, well.
Oh, wait, we got Paul and June. All right, Paul go first and then June.
All right, Paul.
June go first and then Paul.
All right.
Well, number one, I did listen to the webinar, and I appreciate it because I always just the notion of wrestling with and the notion of Jesus as a teacher, because I do wrestle with a lot of the stuff in the Bible, and sometimes I think we're over interpreting it. But then if I think of Jesus as a teacher, I do better with it. But among the things I wrestle with this week's chapter, verse, scripture, and last week's is the whole, it's always about being rewarded in eternity, not on, so that one always bothers me. And I guess I just need to think of it as those were the times, then. But I need to come forward with my own interpretation of what is meaningful to me in that context.
And Jean, we need to talk about that because in
That's a good
some
one.
ways that's a misreading of the gospel. And I think it's a misreading of the Old Testament, which she would say too.
Well, that would be helpful.
Okay, so don't let us forget that because that's a critical.
That's really good. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really good. Paul.
So what I was reminded of last week was the great care that AJ takes with interpretation of words set in the context.
Yeah.
It can be a single word that if you look at it again, the meaning of passage changes quite a bit. The other thing that I'd comment to June on is, when is eternity?
Yeah.
Now.
Yeah, I think about that too.
Yeah.
It's interesting because a lot of what she's writing in this book, or the way she's doing it, and I'm not 100% sure this is my favorite one, to be honest with you, but that's for another discussion. But she really is showing you how she exegetes a passage. I mean, that's what you do. You look at what's before and behind it. You look at the Greek word that you find, like that's what she's doing in this, and she's just demonstrating it in writing. Right. And it really does change a lot.
Right.
I think her writing is a little cumbersome sometimes. That's why I enjoyed the webinar, because she came across as so personable.
Yeah.
So that was nice.
This one, this book feels like it's a little all over the map for me. So it's just, I don't know what it is. I don't know if she's now in that flow where she has to produce books. And so I don't know. So that's why I was hopeful that we could get the video, because I also, June, enjoy listening to her. So anyway, all right, I digress. All right, Faith, go ahead.
No, we're looking at the scripture, which we'll look at the scripture. Just to call your attention to it, it is attached to your agenda for today. And really, she stays with verses 25 and 26 for a lot when we talk about hating. But she does talk about carrying the cross, which for those of you, if you were reading the disciplines this week, that is the lectionary passage about carrying our cross there. So, you might want to reflect on that as well. But then she also tells that parable about the tower and the king, where she's basically saying, if you don't count the cost, don't start something. Or you might find yourself in the middle of it and go, this wasn't what I thought it was. And then comes back actually in verse 33. So therefore, none of you can become my disciple if you do not give up all your possessions. And we're back to where we were last week. So the first, just open up for a general idea, is what caught your attention in this chapter, today's chapter, which was on hate, and what was new to you. And we'll spend maybe a few minutes with that before we go into the video. So were there things that stood out for you in the chapter?
And I've already got
Um,
June's eternal.
Okay, Michelle, and then,
Go ahead, Michelle. There you are. Go ahead, Michelle.
I guess to me, hate is generally a toxic thing. And so
Yeah.
I have problems with the passage in that sense. You know, I don't look on it as a good thing.
but did any of what she said help clarify that? Or
Yes,
detoxify it?
I appreciated the fact that she was kind of ranking what you were going to be obedient to, like your parents versus Jesus. That was helpful to me, because to me that's allegiance as opposed to hatred.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, Paul.
Since you fixed the problem, are we going to see the video?
Yeah. We'll watch it. Yep.
Okay, I think we're
This is
leaving.
just a reflection on the reading before we plunge into the video.
Plunge. I like that.
Robin and then Sandy. Go ahead, Robin.
This is just something that she mentioned almost as kind of a throwaway line, but she said at one point that when she was talking about hate and indifference, she said that in some ways hating God, like for taking a loved one away, is better than being indifferent because you're still in relation.
Yeah.
And it was just kind of a little throwaway idea she had, but I had not thought of that way. And I was just struck by it. You're
Yeah.
still in relation. And so that means your relationship can still change and evolve.
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sandy.
Sandy, you need to unmute.
Unmute yourself. Sorry.
It didn't want to let me unmute. I always like to go read the scripture. I have one in the new Oxford Annotated Bible, which I used when I did this other Bible study. There was a group of us that had a Bible and we used it. I always like to see what they have to say. And it helped me a lot because it said that it referred to the statement on hate as being a hyperbole. It said the severity of this statement suggests that it's supposed to be understood as a hyperbole. And that means it's something that's so ridiculous, you know, like you'll say, oh, this bag of grocery weighs a ton. Well, it doesn't literally weigh a ton. So they're saying it's not literally hate. It's just saying, using that strong word to get your attention, to make you think, okay, yeah, this is important. You know, how you follow Jesus. So that kind of helped me a lot because then I have a problem with the word hate as well.
And she actually says in the
She
book
says that. Yeah.
that this command is not to be taken literally.
Right. Yeah.
And that's what
She
they're saying.
specifically says.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a hyperbole.
Yeah.
So that helped.
Donna.
Well, the thing that I underlined that kind of jumped out at me to think about some more is when she says on page 41 of the book, hate is like love. It is something felt in the heart, not determined by the intellect. And I'm still pondering on that, but I have trouble with the word hate too. It's just such a strong, powerful word, but I think Sandy pointed out that it was meant to be powerful, and that's all.
Yeah.
Just get your attention, like.
Yeah.
And then I wanted to comment on Robin's point, because many years ago I went to work one day upset with my husband, if you could believe that that could ever happen. Very few people can, but anyway, after 20, 30 years, you once in a while get upset with them, you know. And one of my coworkers, a man that I respected a great deal, from the Philippines said, Donna, if you're angry, that means you're still communicating.
Mhm.
If you didn't care, that would be the end of it.
Yeah.
And
That's so good.
So I was lucky to have that lesson earlier, much earlier in life.
Yeah, I like that. Paul?
So I had another thought on hate or whatever word Jesus used. And that is that we learn a lot of lessons from our parents. And we get a lot of influence from our family. And sometimes that is a distraction from our spiritual journey.
Mm.
It's a part of it, but it distracts us from. And so perhaps what Jesus is also saying is you must look at your attachments and decide what you need to let go of or transform in order to be able to follow me.
Yeah. Okay, good.
You want to,
Anybody? And let's go to the video. All right.
let's go to the
ahead.
video and then we'll.
Okay. Well, that was a strong ending. Yeah. I like her better in person. I like her better listening to her than reading her right now.
So responses, questions, comments?
Susan, Paul, go ahead, Susan.
To me, it seems like prioritizing, which, we have to do in life. And if you put Jesus first, then everything else kind of falls into place. If you can do that, certain situations obviously are more challenging than others, and actually risking your life for something. I remember in high school, there were a couple of my friends that were fighting each other, and one was on the ground and the other one was on top and like beating his head into the concrete.
Oh my God.
And being raised with all boys, and there were people standing around, I just jumped in and pulled them apart. I don't know what, I didn't even think about it. I just thought, I don't think this is safe for this person on the ground. And I knew all the people involved, and one happened to be a friend of mine. And so I got a nickname, in high school for pulling them apart, and they thought I was crazier than could be, but it was just the right thing to do.
Oh, you're kind of wonky now.
Something that's, when you react and you see things that are wrong, you have to right them, I mean, and it may be at a cost to you. So be it.
Yep.
What was
Paul?
your nickname?
I think they called me the ref, or a couple other things. I can't remember. It was
The
so
ref.
long ago.
Oh,
but,
that's a good one, the ref.
I mean, it was in good fun. I mean, they, but they were totally, not in favor of me breaking up this fight. But I couldn't stop myself.
Paul?
Yeah, I just wanted to say awestruck. I think this is absolutely the best AJ I've ever seen. Wow.
Strong. Yeah. Yeah. I wrote down a couple of things. One is, I love this question. How do you define yourself as a disciple, and what's the cost? Like, that's just a question I feel like I should have in front of me all the time. Right. And then I really did. I love this idea that there may be something more than love of your family, and that by loving through loving God more, I can love my family, my children, my husband at a deeper, more intense level. And I love that idea. Like, that just, I don't know I have to process through like what that looks like, but I just think it's so profound and expansive.
I think it has something to do with once you've found your focus, Jesus, God, you can disengage from everything else. And so they don't have a hold on you anymore, which means you're free, in a sense, to serve them the way they need to be served and to say to them the truths they don't want to hear. It's interesting. I was just having a conversation with a colleague of mine who's taken on a new responsibility, which most people think he's crazy to do. But he was also saying, I don't have anything to lose by this because I'm invested in this, but I'm not defined by this. I'm not. And I said to him, yeah, it's where I am now in my life. What can anybody do to me? And so I'm free, which means I'm freer than ever before to say and do the things that I need to say and do, even with those I love the most. Does that make any sense to anybody?
It does make sense. I 100% agree, and I agree. I wonder then, what are our costs? Because if you're fully free, like if you wouldn't have, like, do you see what I'm saying? Like if there was, because I think in my own life, there are things that I don't worry about because I know the cost is, like where I may not have done that. I may not have done it. I may not have done the exact same thing 10 years ago because I was scared of what the cost was going to be, where today I don't have to worry about that cost. So I do it. And that's where I wonder, did I pick up my cross? Because I was scared 10 years ago, but I was scared because I was in myself. You know what I mean? Like I was ego filled. Like I was worried about me. I was probably worried about my kids. I think there's something, when there's a cost, it's real.
How do you
It's
know
hard.
your priorities haven't changed though, and that it's just not as important either? Kind of an indifference because you're in a different part of life.
So here's a wild thought going back to, just occurred to me, touching on what June said earlier too. Maybe ultimately there is no cost if I entrust myself to Jesus.
It's said that there's a cost to inaction, but sometimes it's also a cost in action. I agree with your trust very much, because it's hard for us to know how things play out very often, because we don't ultimately know the situation nor know the person fully. But there are costs. There are a lot of stories about this, just short little snippets about how somebody tries to do something they think is going to be good, and it turns out to have adverse effects. I think what happens in your freedom is that you are free to continue to stay tuned in, free to continue to act from a place of loving kindness and care. And in some ways, I think that's the best we can do.
Yeah. And I was gonna say, and I think it's a good thought. I think there is a cost. I think what I wonder about with myself is, do I feel there's a cost to it, but am I free from worrying about what that cost is? Maybe not worrying about it. Maybe that's not the right word. But so there is a cost, but I'm like, you know what? It's okay. It's okay. There's a cost. And I'm not going to allow that cost to control me. I'm going to be free in that space. I don't know.
There's a Chinese saying that, or tradition, that when you save somebody's life, you take care of them for the rest of your life. when you become involved with that involvement can be for life.
Yeah.
In our disposable society, you interact with somebody and then you're on your way. But I think, Jesus wanting to build a community of the kingdom of God realizes that people must stay together.
Well,
And-
I can see Faith's point about the cost, because we have that all the time. I have that all the time. You were really afraid to do something and then you do it and it turns out it was the best thing you ever did, so
Yeah.
the cost isn't what you thought it was going to be. But if I think about it for the cost, because part of the journey is, getting rid of ego and judgment and having loving relationships and all that kind of stuff. And that
Yes.
doesn't seem like there's a whole lot of cost associated with that. I mean, I can't, because it's not really saying what you wanted to say all the time. If what you wanted to say was a judgmental thing, if you wanted
Exactly.
to say a loving thing, then there's not a cost with that. But a cost for me would be, I need to go live in a monastery, or I need to go be Mother Teresa. I need to radically change my lifestyle and my relationships with those I love and care about, and that would be too great a cost for me. So then I have to convince myself that I don't have to do that.
Well, but so I often have the same thing. So, Carol, are you trying to talk?
Sorry.
No, I don't want to talk. Carol, go ahead. Carol Keys.
Kind of going around with this is one of the things she said in there that grabbed me was that when you get to know this person that you quote unquote hate, changes, your relationship changes until maybe it can turn into love.
Mm-hmm.
If you both work with it. And I've experienced that. Jim and I have 8 children together, and they're all over the place, everywhere. And they have some that will do this and some that absolutely stand up and scream and holler and in negativity about it. And it's so hard as parents to be even keel and not judge. And sometimes inside you want to just scream at them, go, what in the world are you thinking? And I remember some things that Faith said to me, not to me, but in one of these Zoom meetings. But when I said something about this, and you said, but you were able to let him talk and let him be okay. And I said, yes, this time I was okay. But there are times when you just go, and you respond rather than. And I think part of what we're learning through all of this getting together and mutually talking about these different things is how to say, I never thought about it that way.
Mm.
I never dreamed I could even think in those terms. I mean, in other words, leaving the door open to love that person back, even though you don't maybe agree with everything they've said, and maybe they hurt your feelings or whatever, but growing in that path. So this really opened that door for me when she said the hate thing, we go through it. We don't stand and bang our heads and bodies against all these things. And that's not easy.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Susan.
My husband had a situation with a guy that was in their group, and he hadn't realized that over 20 years he'd been sexually harassing most of the women that had come into the practice. And what they had done is they'd hired very young women so they could train them in the way that they wanted to train them. And it came to light, and he was given the opportunity to apologize, which he did, but then he didn't change his attitude. He still wanted to take control and do all these things. And the hospital ended up firing him for the way he approached a woman, a security guard, but they had to go to court. They had to take him to court. I said, you're going to lose your business, but it's the right thing to do because this guy has not been, this is not the way you treat people, and especially young people that have no older and whatever. So my husband almost had a nervous breakdown. I mean, he lost work doing this, but it took a lot of money and a lot of time to bring him down, but it was, again, the right thing to do. And it was a big cost, physically and emotionally, a big cost. So.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen situations like this, and to me, one of the things I do wonder, and I was thinking about with June, is I've often thought, okay, do I need to go, leave my family, leave my children and go? And then one of the things I really think about, and maybe this is because Faith started this, is that we are all in a place of privilege in some way, shape, or form. We have, at different but we're all in the place of privilege. And so, so this is where I think it's so important to vote. and because I think that is where we can be courageous. We can be courageous, and we can stand up for things where the system has, and it may mean that we're going to have to pay more. Like, maybe I can't have all the, I mean, Brandon, we work really hard, and I know what we pay in tax, and you know what? That's okay. And maybe we need to pay more in tax. And that's a hard pill to swallow, and it's one we've talked about a lot, and it gets really complicated. But we've got a pretty daggone good life. I'm not wanting for anything, and maybe that means I need to give more to other people. And I will say, the only thing I will say is, I've told you that we have a Black Lives Matter sign on our gate, and that should just tell you that clearly I need to pay tax because I have a gate, right? We have had more problems because of this sign with white people. And I'll say that when we put that sign up, we had a man who was working across the street, a Black man, and he came over and he said, first, I want to thank you for putting that sign up. Second, you are way too courageous for that around here. And we said, no. We were naive because we are white people and we don't understand. And now, after a year later, Brandon has lost business. We've had to get off of things. Our school has attacked us because of a sign.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Robin.
Kind of along those lines, I was struck at the beginning when Faith said something about, I think she was talking about last week's, about wealth, about looking at how we got our wealth. And, my first thought is, well, besides that I inherited some from my parents, I worked for my wealth. And my second thought was privilege. My work bore the kind of fruit it did because of the privilege I had. And that's just what Dana was talking about. It's invisible, it's really easy to overlook, and we shouldn't, because it underlies so much of what we have and are able to accomplish.
I think one of the things that stood out for me most with what AJ said in the book was the line, and I did put it in the agenda, Jesus doesn't want his followers to die. Rather, he wants them to be sure that their life means something in its full dedication to the gospel. And so often we pastors preach, pick up your cross and die. And we talk about dying as if that were the only sacrifice, if that were the only cost, if you will, that one. And we don't go further by saying, okay, that isn't what Jesus is asking you. You may be called to die. There have been those who have to die for their faith. But that's not what he's calling most of us to do, to literally die. but to make these hard decisions, face these hard questions, give up these things that we think are of ultimate value to us, and to discover that they aren't. And that's a different way of looking at the cross as well. And what I meant when I said that maybe there is no cross is that ultimately there isn't.
Right.
Because even death doesn't separate me, doesn't take me out of God's love.
Donna?
I also was well, interested in the fact that she points out that it's a matter of purpose. She uses the word purpose in life that makes a difference and can bring you closer to Jesus. I see a lot of that here. It's heartbreaking. So many people here at Las Palmas, where the assisted living, everybody's mixed together except for the more seriously mentally needing help. But so many of them have no purpose. It's sad, really sad. And I think that that's something we need to work on in society, as to being seniors, at least seniors in their later, seniors now have a different age group. We need a new title for seniors and helping them to have a purpose.
Yeah.
We lose that in our advanced years, except like Faith said, it's also freeing for us. I remember one time when Reverend Mark was here, I must have confronted him about something, or at least I spoke up more than I normally would. And as I was leaving his office, I turned around to him. We had a good relationship. I said, you know, Mark, the older I get, and I couldn't think of the word, but of course he's good with words. He says, the bolder you get. And I said, that's absolutely right. And it has to do with this freeing of age, the age that comes with age. So we need a new term. I like elders myself.
Elder senior.
I
Just
remember
elder.
a 90-year-old parishioner of mine who said, you know, we still need to be challenged. We still need to be educated in the faith. Don't write us off. It's like, hey, you're right. We're almost out of time. We can stay a while and keep talking, but I do want to call your attention to the personal work, because we put that in there each week just so you can kind of apply what we've been talking about. And this week you're asked to look for a positive and negative example of the hate that's in the world, which AJ describes, positive and negative, and note your reaction to both. And then what is it calling you to do? That particular situation might call you to do something, or you might be called to do something else, but look for both. She says there's both in the world today, positive and negative. So any other comments on the video or the questions or the book? Michelle?
Now, this is asking for advice. If you're asking that question, I do have a situation of quote unquote hate that came up. A member of my family who really hates another member of the family, I guess you could say, really kind of let loose and spewed all over. And every time that other person's name comes up, that's what happens.
Carol's agreeing with you. Carol said she knows that truth.
Um,
Yeah.
any way to turn it into a better situation?
What do you
I think
say?
they have,
Fritz?
I think they have to choose that path.
We've had that in our family.
I think the important thing is that you
Both choose path.
don't engage.
Yeah.
Well, I try
Yeah.
not to engage. She was taking me to a medical appointment, and my other sister-in-law is coming out for a visit, and she said, who's coming, are they going to see? And I listed off the people, and one of the people I listed was this other person, and she just lost it. I wasn't trying to. I finally said, I got to leave for my medical appointment, got out of the car.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you're just saying be neutral?
Well, I have a situation in my family where that is, it's not another family member, it's a friend. And I just kind of say, that's between you two.
Mm-hmm.
And you two need to solve that. And I am not taking sides because I can't.
Mm-mm.
I love them both
Mm.
in this case. And one is not a biological member of my family, but I love them both. I don't understand what started it between the two of you, but you are adults and you've either got to solve it. Don't put me in the middle of it. I can't.
Paul,
solve
go
it.
ahead.
So I had a situation